He told her she was just a game. But 3 years later, the millionaire CEO froze, because the little girl beside her had his blue eyes. Amelia never expected the world to fall apart in a single sentence, but that was exactly what happened the day Lucas Randall looked at her with those distant blue eyes and spoke as if she were nothing more than a temporary amusement. They were standing in his corner office on the 42nd floor, the sunset bleeding orange light across the skyline, yet his expression held no warmth at all. She remembered thinking how surreal it felt that someone she once trusted with her heart now stared through her like she was a stranger. When he said, "I was just playing with you," the words didn't sound cruel or angry, they were frighteningly empty, as if he had already erased her from his life before the sentence even ended. The tone, not the meaning, was what sliced her open. Amelia had known Lucas for nearly a year. She had seen the man beneath the title, or at least she thought she had. Late-night takeout in his penthouse, quiet conversations that stretched until dawn, the way he sometimes allowed himself to laugh, soft, rare, unguarded. She had memorized those moments. She had treasured them. She had built a life around the belief that he felt something too. But now, standing in front of her in an impeccably tailored suit, he looked like the version of himself the world worshipped and feared, untouchable, unreadable, unreachable. It was as if every piece of him she had ever known had been replaced by marble. Her mouth went dry as she tried to process what he had said. You didn't mean any of it?" Her voice wavered, betraying the desperation she wished she could hide. Lucas blinked once, almost bored, and replied, "No. I told you from the beginning I wasn't looking for anything serious." He hadn't said it like that. He hadn't said it with such cold finality. She remembered him telling her he didn't want a relationship, yes, but then he held her afterward, kissed her slow and tender like a man who didn't want to let go. He shared pieces of his childhood, secrets about his father, fears he'd never told anyone else. You don't do that with someone who means nothing. But he wasn't willing to admit any of it. Not now. Not when it mattered. Her hands trembled, and she clasped them together to keep him from seeing how deeply his words struck her. She took a step back, nearly tripping over her own feet, her breath catching in her chest. She felt humiliated and foolish, exposed in a way that made her want to disappear. She hated that she had let him in so completely. She hated that she had believed him. Lucas watched her without emotion, as if observing a business deal fall apart. "It's better we end this now," he added, almost clinically. "Before you get too attached. Before you get too attached." As if she hadn't already shattered. A bitter laugh escaped her before she could stop it, but it sounded like a sob pressed into the shape of a smile. Too late, she whispered to herself more than to him. She turned toward the door, blinking fast to keep tears from spilling, wanting nothing more than to flee the suffocating office, the glass walls, the man who had reduced months of tenderness into a forgettable pastime. She reached the elevator, pressed the button, and stared at her reflection in the polished metal doors. Her face was pale, her eyes already glossed with tears she refused to let fall in his building. When the elevator chimed and the doors slid open, she stepped inside and exhaled shakily, one hand gripping the railing for support. The doors began to close, cutting off her view of that office, of that man, of the life she thought she was building. Just before the doors sealed completely, Lucas turned away from her, already on his phone, already moving on. Not even looking back. That final image burned into her. It followed her down every floor of the building. It carved itself into her memory as the elevator descended toward the lobby. By the time she stepped out into the cold evening air, she felt hollow, like something inside her had snapped so loudly she could almost hear the echo. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly imagine, was that she wasn't walking away alone. That the tiny spark of life growing inside her had already begun only days earlier. That this moment, this heartbreak, this silence would shape everything that came next. She pressed a hand gently to her stomach, unaware of the miracle beginning there, unaware that the child she would soon discover was already changing her fate. She only knew one thing as she stepped into the night: she had to survive the pain of Lucas Randall telling her she was nothing. What she didn't know yet was that one day, he would pay dearly for those words. And he would regret them for the rest of his life. Amelia woke the next morning with a heaviness in her chest that felt almost physical, as if grief had pooled inside her overnight. She lay still for a few minutes, staring at the faint cracks in the ceiling of her tiny apartment, wondering how one night could change the shape of her entire future. Memories of Lucas's expression, flat, uninterested, cold, flashed through her mind like a cruel slideshow. She squeezed her eyes shut, willing the images to fade, but her body still trembled as though the emotional blow had been delivered only moments ago. Eventually she forced herself out of bed, every movement stiff, as though her bones carried the weight of the heartbreak. She tried to follow her usual routine, hoping it would steady her. She brewed coffee, though the smell made her stomach twist. She took a shower, but hot water only reminded her how often Lucas had pulled her under it with him, kissing her as though the world outside didn't exist. She sat on the couch and tried to breathe normally, but everything around her seemed infected with memories: his jacket still hanging on the hook near the door, the book he bought her lying on the coffee table, the blanket he always stole because he said hers was softer. She didn't cry, not at first. She just felt numb, suspended in a silence that was too sharp to escape. But when she reached for her phone, half hoping he might have texted, the emptiness of the screen hit her so hard she folded forward, pressing her palms against her face. The first tear fell. Then another. And then all the emotions she had tried to hold back burst through at once: fear, humiliation, betrayal, disbelief. Hours passed like that. Her phone vibrated, but it wasn't him. It was her body, reminding her something wasn't right. Another wave of nausea rolled through her so suddenly she barely made it to the bathroom. She knelt on the tile floor, gripping the edges of the sink as her stomach convulsed. It wasn't the first morning she'd felt sick, but she had blamed it on stress. On heartbreak. On exhaustion. Now the sensation felt different, deeper, inexplicable. When the nausea finally eased, she stayed on the floor, staring at the cabinets under the sink. Somewhere in the back of her mind, a thought had already taken root the day before, an unwelcome shadow creeping across her consciousness. She swallowed hard, pushed herself upright, and opened the cabinet door with trembling fingers. A pregnancy test, one she had purchased months ago, just in case, was still there. Her heartbeat thudded violently as she opened the box. She told herself she was being dramatic. That this was just a cruel moment of paranoia. That heartbreak didn't need to be accompanied by another catastrophe. But when she finished the test and set it on the counter, those 2 minutes of waiting stretched into something eternal. She paced, sat, stood again, wiped her face, pressed her hand to her stomach as if she already knew. When she finally had the courage to look, the breath left her lungs in a painful rush. 2 lines. Bold. Undeniable. Her knees nearly gave out, and she steadied herself against the counter, her body shaking. She didn't know how long she stood there, staring at the tiny plastic object that had just rewritten the rest of her life. Pregnant. With Lucas's child. Her first thought was terror. Her second was heartbreak. Her third was something far more complicated: love, fragile and trembling, for someone she hadn't even met. She pressed a hand to her abdomen, tears falling silently down her cheeks. She imagined his reaction, cold, distant, dismissive. She imagined him repeating the same words: "I was just playing with you." She imagined him denying the child, blaming her, walking away without looking back. And the thought was unbearable. She couldn't tell him. Not now. Not after the way he had thrown her away. She couldn't let her child be treated like a mistake or a burden. She wouldn't give Lucas the power to break another heart, especially one that hadn't yet begun to beat strongly enough to survive it. In the days that followed, Amelia made decisions she never imagined she'd have to make. She quit her job, telling her boss she needed to move closer to family. She packed her apartment slowly, sorting through every item with a mix of sorrow and determination. She blocked Lucas's number, not because she feared he would call, but because she feared she would crumble if he did. She found a small house for rent in Snow Haven, a quiet town far from the city, far from the glass towers and the memories she could no longer bear. She left one early morning, her car filled with boxes and a single suitcase. She didn't look back at the city skyline. She didn't allow herself to revisit the office where her heart had been broken or the penthouse where she had once felt loved. When she arrived in Snow Haven, the air felt different, gentler, a little slower, as though this town existed for people who needed to heal. She found a job at the local library and spent her evenings researching pregnancy, nutrition, baby names, parenting advice. She surrounded herself with soft blankets and calming routines, building a world where her child would feel wanted before it was even born. There were nights when loneliness tried to swallow her. Nights when she wondered how she would raise a child alone, nights when the memory of Lucas's cold expression haunted her so deeply she could barely breathe. But every time she heard the small flutter of the baby's heartbeat at the doctor's office, strength grew inside her. She was no longer living for herself. She was living for the tiny life growing within her. And though she didn't know it yet, this child, this miracle, would be the very thing fate used to bring Lucas Randall to his knees 3 years later, when he least expected it and least deserved it. Lucas spent the next 3 years convincing himself that nothing was wrong with his life, even as every part of it slowly began collapsing in ways he refused to acknowledge. In the beginning, right after Amelia disappeared from his orbit, he expected to feel relief. He thought cutting ties with her would give him more time, more focus, more control. Instead, the silence she left behind echoed through his penthouse like a reminder he couldn't escape. He buried himself in work with an intensity that bordered on obsession, arriving at the office before dawn and leaving long after the city lights flickered on. Even then, he found no comfort in productivity, just a numbness that expanded each day he pretended not to notice her absence. He told himself he missed her presence because she was familiar, not because she mattered. But some nights, after the world quieted and his apartment felt too large, he found himself replaying old memories he swore he'd forgotten. Amelia laughing at something stupid he said. Amelia curled against him on the couch when she fell asleep mid-movie. Amelia's hand brushing his at the breakfast table, a small touch that felt more intimate than anything he'd ever known. Those memories arrived uninvited, slipping through the cracks of the persona he tried so hard to maintain. He pushed them away every time, convincing himself it was nothing more than nostalgia, nothing more than a habit he needed to break. Yet the emptiness only grew. His friends noticed first. Colleagues commented on how distant he had become, how quickly his irritation flared, how his focus wavered during meetings. His assistant hesitated whenever she entered his office, sensing the storm simmering beneath his composed surface. Even his mother, who rarely acknowledged emotions unless they could benefit her social image, asked him if something was wrong. Lucas denied it, insisting he was fine, just busy, and everyone eventually stopped asking. But the truth followed him everywhere, in the car, in the boardroom, in the dark silence of his bedroom. At one point, he tried dating again. Beautiful women with perfect smiles and polished manners entered his life, expecting to be dazzled by the mysterious billionaire. He took them to expensive restaurants, listened to them talk about their lives, nodded in all the right places, but nothing ever landed. He felt neither excitement nor curiosity, only a hollow irritation that grew each time he compared their forced charm to the ease he once shared with Amelia. More than once, he imagined her sitting across from him instead, listening with genuine interest or teasing him until he surrendered to a smile. Each time, the image left him feeling unsettled, bruised in a place he refused to name. Eventually, dating became another obligation he abandoned. Work consumed him again, a safer distraction than pretending he could replace what he lost. But even success began to feel like a task. Deals he once celebrated became meaningless. Achievements that used to motivate him now faded within minutes. He attended gala events and business gatherings, but each one felt more suffocating than the last. He smiled for cameras, shook hands with people who wanted something from him, and returned home feeling more isolated than ever. Late one night, after yet another award ceremony where he felt nothing at all, Lucas stood in his penthouse staring out at the city lights. The skyline was beautiful, cold, glittering, alive in a way he no longer felt. He tried to imagine what Amelia might be doing now, and the thought hit him harder than expected. He wondered if she hated him. If she ever thought about him. If she had moved on. If she had found someone better. The idea made his chest tighten painfully, a sensation he initially mistook for stress. But deep down, he knew it was fear that he had pushed away the only person who ever saw him beyond the image, beyond the wealth, beyond the armor. Months continued to pass, each one sharpening the quiet ache he carried. He sometimes pulled out a photograph he promised himself he wouldn't keep, Amelia sitting on his couch wearing one of his shirts, her brown hair pulled up messily, her eyes warm as she smiled up at him. He stared at that photo longer than he ever admitted, tracing the memory of the moment they took it. That morning had been simple and soft, the kind of morning he once believed could belong in a future they shared. Now the memory stung like a warning he ignored. By the third year, Lucas had become a man who lived inside a life that looked perfect from the outside and felt suffocating from within. He didn't even realize how much he had changed until his grandmother visited him unexpectedly. Helen Randall was the only member of his family who cared for him as a person rather than an asset. She looked at him that afternoon with sharp eyes that saw too much. "You look lonely," she said gently. He wanted to deny it, but the words stuck in his throat. Helen's gaze softened, and she reached for his hand, a rare gesture. "Whatever you're missing, Lucas, it's not going to fix itself. You have to stop pretending you're made of stone." The comment unsettled him for days. He didn't know how to go backward. He didn't know how to undo the damage. He didn't even know how to find Amelia, much less what he would say to her if he did. And despite everything, he convinced himself she was better off without him, that she had moved on, that she lived a happier life far away from the chaos that followed him everywhere. What Lucas never imagined, what never once occurred to him, was that Amelia wasn't alone in her new life. That she had created something precious, something whole, something that carried his eyes and his blood. A little girl who looked so much like him that strangers would stop to comment. A little girl who would one day run straight into his arms without knowing she was running toward her father. Lucas believed he had lost Amelia. He had no idea he had also lost 3 years of his daughter's life. And the truth was about to hit him with a force greater than anything he had ever prepared for. Amelia never imagined how quickly 3 years could pass when every moment revolved around raising a child alone. The early months were the hardest, sleepless nights, endless crying, fears she was doing something wrong, but the moment Lily wrapped her tiny fingers around her mother's thumb, everything inside Amelia healed just enough for her to keep going. Love arrived in unexpected waves, fierce and instinctive, carrying her through mornings when exhaustion felt unbearable and evenings when loneliness pressed heavily against her ribs. Little by little, she built a new life in Snow Haven, far away from skyscrapers and glass offices, far away from Lucas Randall and the world he inhabited. Her job at the library became her sanctuary. The quiet rustle of pages, the warm scent of old books, and the soft hum of whispered conversations created a peaceful rhythm that grounded her. The locals embraced her quickly, charmed by her gentleness and captivated by the bright blue-eyed toddler who toddled between shelves with an enthusiasm most adults reserved for holidays. Lily became a familiar face, greeting patrons with shy smiles, pointing at picture books, and climbing into Amelia's lap whenever she read aloud during children's hour. Outside of work, their small rented house at the edge of town slowly transformed into a home. Amelia painted the nursery a soft pastel yellow, decorated the walls with hand-drawn butterflies, and filled the shelves with books she loved as a child. Lily learned to take her first steps on those worn hardwood floors, giggling with each unsteady wobble as if she knew she was moving into a future meant just for her. Despite the joy motherhood brought, Amelia sometimes found herself overwhelmed by the cruel irony that her daughter resembled Lucas more with every passing month. The same dark hair. The same exquisite blue eyes. The same concentrated expression whenever she studied something new. Amelia often caught strangers commenting on Lily's striking appearance, saying things like, "She looks like she'll grow up to be someone important," or, "I've never seen eyes that blue." Each time, Amelia forced herself to smile politely, even though her heart tightened with memories she wished she could erase. She didn't regret her daughter. Never. But she did regret loving a man who offered her nothing but pain. Whenever Lily's features reminded her of Lucas, Amelia reminded herself that genetics didn't define destiny. Lily would grow up loved, supported, and safe, everything she herself had once hoped to give her child's father, before he ripped her hopes apart. Still, time had a way of softening sharp edges, even if only slightly. Amelia rarely thought of Lucas now, not with longing but with an ache that had dulled into something muted and distant. She no longer replayed their conversations or analyzed the moment he dismissed her. Instead, she focused on giving Lily the kind of life no one could take from her. That focus was why she agreed to help when the Snow Haven Children's Foundation asked her to assist with the annual community festival in the park. They needed someone organized and calm, and Amelia fit the description effortlessly. She volunteered to man the reading tent, which felt comfortable and familiar. She didn't know she was walking straight into the moment fate had been preparing for 3 long years. The morning of the festival was warm and bright, the kind of day that filled the town square with music, laughter, and the smell of sweet pastries from food stalls. Children ran through the grass with painted faces, balloons bobbing behind them. Amelia set up a display of picture books while Lily toddled around her, wearing a tiny sundress and carrying a plush rabbit that had become her constant companion. The little girl's laughter blended with the hum of the event, drawing smiles from everyone nearby. Amelia was kneeling beside a box of books when she felt Lily tug on her sleeve, pointing excitedly toward a group of people entering the park. Amelia smiled at her daughter, brushing a dark curl behind her ear, but when she looked in the direction Lily pointed, the smile froze on her lips. She blinked, convinced for a moment that her eyes were deceiving her. But the tall figure moving through the crowd, broad-shouldered, impeccably dressed even in a casual setting, dark hair catching the sunlight, was unmistakable. Lucas Randall looked impossibly out of place among the families and children, like a shadow cutting through a field of color. Her breath caught. Her pulse stumbled. He wasn't supposed to be here. He didn't belong in this world, in her world, in the life she had built with such fragile determination. Panic fluttered in her chest as she instinctively reached for Lily, drawing her closer. Lucas scanned the area with an expression that seemed carved from stone, but the moment his gaze landed on her, the mask cracked. She saw it clearly: shock, disbelief, recognition, and something else, something deeper, flickering in the piercing blue of his eyes. Before she could move, before she could hide, before she could protect the life she had spent 3 years shielding from him, his attention dropped to the little girl clinging to her hand. Time slowed, stretched, and collapsed all at once. Lily stared back at him with the same ice-blue eyes he saw in the mirror every morning. Their resemblance was unmistakable, overwhelming, undeniable. Amelia felt the ground shift beneath her feet as Lucas's expression changed from shock to comprehension, then to devastation so raw she couldn't breathe. His lips parted slightly, as if he had been struck. His knees nearly buckled. Amelia turned, instinctively trying to leave, but it was too late. Fate had found them. Lucas took a step forward. Then another. And the world she had so carefully constructed trembled under the weight of the truth he had just discovered. Lucas didn't remember taking those first few steps toward Amelia. His body moved before his mind caught up, drawn by a force stronger than logic, stronger than the years he'd spent pretending the past didn't matter. The crowd around him blurred into indistinct shapes and noise, fading until the only clear thing in the entire park was the woman he had once broken and the child standing beside her, his child, impossibly real and heartbreakingly beautiful. He could barely breathe as he approached them, each step feeling like it carried the weight of 3 years of regret. Amelia's posture shifted the moment she realized he was coming closer. Every muscle in her body tensed, her arm instinctively wrapping around Lily as if shielding her from something dangerous. Lucas hated that he had become a threat in her eyes. He hated that she had every reason to see him that way. His stomach twisted painfully, and for the first time in his life, fear hollowed out his chest in a way that made it difficult to speak. But he forced the words out anyway. Amelia. His voice cracked, thin and unsteady, nothing like the controlled tone he was known for. She didn't respond at first, her gaze locked somewhere between shock and fury. Lily pressed her face into her mother's leg, peeking shyly at him with eyes far too familiar. Those bright blue irises, his irises, cut into him with a truth he couldn't escape. He lifted a trembling hand to his mouth as understanding struck him with devastating clarity. Is she? He couldn't finish the sentence, the fear of her answer lodged itself in his throat. Amelia hesitated for several long seconds before finally whispering, yes. The ground beneath him vanished. His chest caved inward as if her single syllable had pulled every drop of air from his lungs. He staggered back a step, gripping the edge of a nearby table to steady himself. His vision blurred as a wave of emotions surged, shock, grief, guilt, awe, disbelief. He swallowed hard, struggling to speak. Why didn't you tell me? Anger flashed in her eyes, raw and painful. Because you told me you were just playing with me, she whispered sharply. Because you made it very clear that I meant nothing to you. And I refused to let my daughter grow up being treated like that. Her words were a blade, slicing through every illusion he had built around himself. He felt the truth of them bury itself in his chest. His voice dropped to a hoarse whisper. I didn't know. Amelia, I swear, if I had known. She cut him off with a bitter laugh, though her eyes glistened. If you had known, what? You would have stepped in out of obligation? Out of guilt? You would have treated her the way you treated me? She shook her head. I wasn't going to risk that. Lucas looked down at Lily again, and the sight of her nearly brought him to his knees. She was tiny and delicate, her dark hair tied in small pigtails, her plush rabbit clutched tightly in one hand. She studied him with a timid curiosity, tilting her head just slightly, the same gesture he had seen himself make countless times in reflective office windows. The realization that he had missed her first steps, her first words, her first laugh hit him like physical pain. His palms grew cold, and he pressed one against his chest as if trying to hold himself together. He knelt slowly, careful not to frighten her, his movements gentle and hesitant. His voice shook when he spoke. Hi, Lily. He tried to smile, but it wavered. I'm. He couldn't bring himself to say the word father. He didn't deserve that title. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But the possibility of it trembled on his tongue like something sacred. I'm Lucas. Lily peeked at him again, her gaze lingering on his face with innocent curiosity. And then, so simple, so devastating, she gave him a tiny smile. A small, trusting smile that sent a crack straight through his soul. He exhaled shakily, tears stinging his eyes. She's beautiful, he whispered, still kneeling. She looks so much like. He stopped, unable to say it aloud. Like me. Like everything I threw away. Amelia's expression faltered at the sight of his grief, but she stayed silent, keeping a protective hand on Lily's shoulder. Lucas wiped his face quickly, embarrassed by the emotion spilling out of him in a place where anyone could see. But he couldn't help it. Tears kept welling, not dramatic sobs but the quiet, broken kind that came from a place too deep to hide. "Amelia," he said softly, rising back to his feet, though his voice remained uneven, "I know I can't undo the past. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But please, let me be in her life." She looked at him, struggling visibly. Anger flickered in her expression, but beneath it was fear, and something even more fragile, something that looked almost like pain. "I don't know, Lucas. I don't know if I can trust you. And I will not let you hurt her." "I won't," he whispered fiercely. "I swear I won't. I will do anything, anything, to be someone she can count on." Before Amelia could respond, Lily tugged on her mother's hand and pointed at Lucas's watch, fascinated by the way it glimmered in the sunlight. Lucas knelt again and slowly unfastened it, offering it to her with trembling fingers. "Here, if you want to look." Lily reached out cautiously, her tiny fingers brushing his palm before she took the watch with a delighted squeal. Lucas let out a quiet, breathless laugh, the first genuine sound of joy he had felt in years. In that moment, Amelia saw something in him she had never expected to see again. Not arrogance. Not coldness. But vulnerability. And love. The kind that hadn't existed when they were together. The kind that had grown in the absence he never knew he had created. The festival noise continued around them, but for the three of them, the world had narrowed to a single fragile moment, a moment that carried the weight of the past and the possibility of a future none of them had been ready for. Amelia slowly exhaled, her heart twisting in ways she didn't want to admit. Lucas rose again, his eyes still wet, his expression open and unguarded. He looked at her not with the dismissiveness she remembered, but with a pleading softness she had never seen before. For the first time since she left the city, she realized that nothing would ever be the same again. Lucas had found them. And there was no going back. Lucas returned to Snow Haven the very next day, even though Amelia had given him no promise, no invitation, not even the smallest sign that she wanted to see him again. He arrived early in the morning, sitting in his car outside the library with his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He had spent the entire night replaying every detail of the moment he discovered he had a daughter, barely sleeping, barely eating, unable to focus on anything except the image of Lily's bright blue eyes staring up at him. He had never known a single moment could unravel his entire identity, but this one had, and he wasn't sure if he was standing at the beginning of salvation or ruin. He didn't dare knock on Amelia's door that first morning. He knew she needed space, and for the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to wait instead of control, to respect instead of insist. So he sat there quietly, watching the entrance, unsure if she would even let him see Lily again. When Amelia finally arrived with her daughter, Lucas stepped out of the car cautiously, his heart pounding. Lily held her mother's hand, clutching her rabbit toy with the other, her hair pulled into two messy pigtails. She spotted him first and broke into a smile, small, shy, but real. That smile nearly brought him to his knees. Amelia froze when she saw him, tension instantly tightening her shoulders. "Lucas," she said carefully, her voice neutral, almost too controlled. He held up his hands in a gesture of surrender. "I'm not here to push. I'm not here to demand anything. I just wanted to see her. If that's okay." Lily tugged on Amelia's arm. "Mama, it's him," she whispered in a way that made Lucas's chest tighten. She didn't understand who he was, but she recognized him, recognized something in him. Children had instincts adults didn't. Amelia hesitated, but eventually she nodded once. For a few minutes. Outside. Those minutes turned into an hour. And when Lucas returned the next day, they turned into 2. Amelia watched him closely every time, how he spoke to Lily, how gently he held her tiny hands, how patiently he answered her questions even when she jumped between topics with the wildness only a 3-year-old had. He never once raised his voice, never once looked bored or distracted, never once reached for his phone. He listened to Lily as if there was nothing else in the world worth hearing. He was awkward at first, so clearly unaccustomed to being around children, but he learned quickly. He learned that Lily loved picture books and hated sticky fingers. He learned that she was terrified of dogs larger than her plush rabbit. He learned that she liked to sit on the ground next to the garden bed and talk to flowers, whispering her secrets to petals as if they held all the wisdom in the world. And slowly, carefully, he began to fit into the rhythms of her life. One afternoon, as Lily colored with chalk on the sidewalk, Amelia leaned against the wooden fence, arms crossed as she watched Lucas crouch beside their daughter. She tried not to feel anything, but something inside her twisted painfully. He looked so different from the man she remembered, softer, quieter, stripped of the arrogance that once shielded him from everything human. He glanced at her over Lily's head, a question lingering in his eyes. She looked away before he could read too much. But he had already seen it, her conflict, her fear, her fragile hope. That knowledge made him more careful than ever. "Amelia," he said quietly one day as Lily napped in the shade, "I know you think I'll disappear, or disappoint her, or hurt her the way I hurt you. And you're right to be afraid of that. I would be afraid too." She didn't respond, just stared at the grass as though it held the answers she didn't want to say out loud. "But I'm here," he continued, his voice trembling slightly. "And I'm not leaving. Not again. Even if you never want anything to do with me, even if you never forgive me, even if the only thing you allow is for me to be in her life, that's enough." His sincerity disarmed her more than anything else he could have said. She had prepared for anger, denial, excuses. She had expected him to blame her for keeping Lily's secret. But he didn't. He accepted the consequences without argument, without resentment, without trying to rewrite the past. Later that evening, a storm rolled into Snow Haven, thunder that shook the windows, lightning that lit up the entire street. Lily woke up crying, trembling in fear. Before Amelia could even reach her, Lucas was already there, scooping the little girl into his arms. He held her close, whispering softly, rocking her gently as she buried her face in his shoulder. He didn't let go until her sobs quieted and her breathing softened. Amelia stood at the doorway, watching them, and something inside her cracked open. Seeing Lucas hold their terrified daughter with such instinctive tenderness made something in her chest ache in a way she hadn't felt since before he broke her heart. The storm lasted well into the night, and Lucas refused to leave until Lily was fully asleep. Even then, he lingered by the door, uncertain. "Thank you," Amelia said softly, her voice subdued but sincere. He nodded, his expression vulnerable. "I'll always come when she needs me." He didn't say when you need me too. He didn't have to. Something in his eyes said it anyway. For the first time in 3 years, Amelia didn't close the door immediately after he left. She stood in the doorway, staring into the night, her heart unsettled and unsteady, wondering if it was possible that the man who once destroyed her was slowly, quietly becoming someone entirely new. And she feared, more than anything, that she wanted to believe him. Lucas began returning to Snow Haven so often that the rhythm of Amelia's days shifted without her permission, stretching to make space for him in ways she didn't know how to stop. He never arrived unannounced, he always texted first, asking if she was comfortable with him coming by. Sometimes she ignored the message, too overwhelmed by the storm of emotions inside her, and on those days he stayed away without complaint. But on the days she replied yes, even if her answer was hesitant, he came running, as if every mile between the city and Snow Haven felt unbearable. Lily grew attached to him quickly. She wasn't foolish, she sensed things Amelia wished she didn't have to explain. She sensed that Lucas belonged to her in a way no one else ever had. She learned his laugh, the soft one he never used in public. She learned how to tug at his hand to get his attention, how to climb onto his lap with absolutely no warning, how to press stickers onto his shirt until he looked ridiculous. Lucas accepted every sticker with a reverence that made Amelia's throat tighten. Each one felt like a piece of redemption taped directly onto his chest. He stayed longer each visit, not because he asked to, but because Lily began clinging to him when he tried to leave. She would wrap her arms around his leg, burying her face against him, whispering, "Stay a little," in a tone so sweet and fragile that it destroyed him every single time. He always stayed. Amelia pretended not to watch the way his heart broke and mended at the same time, but she saw it. She saw everything. And it terrified her. One afternoon, while Lily built towers from mismatched blocks on the living room floor, Lucas helped her arrange them carefully, making sure she didn't topple them with her enthusiasm. Amelia sat at the dining table sorting through paperwork, but her attention kept drifting back to them. Lily squealed when one tower finally stood straight, and Lucas caught her in his arms, lifting her up as she giggled with triumphant joy. Something inside Amelia twisted painfully. That sound, Lily's pure laughter, echoed off the walls, awakening memories of a life Amelia had once imagined but forced herself to bury. As evening approached, Lily curled up in Lucas's lap, growing sleepier by the minute while he read one of her favorite storybooks. Amelia watched the scene from the doorway, her heart aching with emotions she didn't know how to name. She had spent 3 years carefully building shields, convincing herself that Lucas could never be trusted again. But watching him now, his arms wrapped protectively around their daughter, his voice softening at every page, she felt those shields begin to tremble. When Lily finally drifted off, Lucas carried her to her bedroom, laying her down with a tenderness that made Amelia turn away. She didn't want him to see the crack in her composure. She didn't want him to know how deeply his presence affected her. When he returned to the hallway, she stood with her arms crossed, trying to mask the storm inside her. "You're good with her," she said carefully, trying to sound neutral. Lucas nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know I could be." Silence stretched between them, heavy and pulsing with things left unsaid. Lucas's gaze softened as he studied her face, as though trying to piece together the woman she had become in his absence. "You've done an incredible job with her," he said quietly. "She's smart. She's confident. She's gentle. That's because of you." Amelia swallowed hard, caught off guard by the sincerity in his tone. "She made it easy," she murmured, though deep down she knew the truth, Lily had saved her. Lucas stepped closer, but stopped at a respectful distance. He lowered his voice. "I know I don't deserve your trust. I know I didn't earn the right to be in her life. But Amelia, please let me keep trying." Emotion surged up her throat faster than she could suppress it. "I'm still angry," she whispered. "I can't pretend I'm not. You broke something in me, Lucas. Something I really thought would never heal." His expression crumpled in a way she had never seen. For once, he didn't hide from pain, he let it show. "I know," he said. "And you don't have to forgive me. Not now. Not ever. But let me be here for her. Let me be the father she deserves. Even if you never want anything more from me." His humility unsettled her. It stripped away the image of the cold, arrogant CEO she once knew and revealed a man she barely recognized, vulnerable, remorseful, and quietly desperate for redemption. The wind outside grew stronger, rattling the windows with the first gusts of an unexpected storm. Amelia glanced toward the porch nervously. Storms always came quickly in Snow Haven, and tonight's one looked fierce. Before she could say anything, rain began to pound against the roof. A loud crack of thunder shook the house, and Lily's scream pierced the silence. Amelia ran to the bedroom, but Lucas was faster. He scooped Lily into his arms, holding her tightly as she sobbed into his chest. His hand moved gently over her back, whispering soothing words that seemed to melt her fear little by little. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm right here. You're safe." Amelia watched them from the doorway, her heart swelling painfully. She had held Lily through storms like this countless times, but Lucas's presence brought a calm she hadn't expected. Lily clung to him, trembling, but she wasn't screaming anymore. She trusted him. When the thunder softened, Amelia approached and placed a hand on Lily's back. Lucas shifted, guiding her gently into Amelia's arms without waking her. Their hands brushed lightly, warm, unintentional, electric. She pulled back quickly, her pulse racing. "You should stay until the storm passes," she said quietly, not meeting his eyes. Lucas didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and earnest. "If that's what you want." Amelia hesitated, then nodded once. "Just for Lily." But she wasn't sure if that was the whole truth. They returned to the living room after settling Lily down again. Lucas sat on the floor with his back against the couch while Amelia lingered near the table, unsure if she should sit or flee. Rain hammered the windows, thunder rumbling like distant drums. The warm glow of a small lamp softened the room, casting shadows across Lucas's face. He looked exhausted but peaceful, as if being here, with them, grounded him in a way the rest of the world couldn't. "Amelia," he said softly, "I know you don't believe I've changed. But I have." She crossed her arms, trying to keep her defenses high. "People don't change that easily." He offered a small, broken smile. "I didn't say it was easy. I just said I did." She didn't respond, not because she didn't have words, but because she wasn't sure which ones were true anymore. The storm raged outside, but inside the house, a different kind of storm softened. Not resolved. Not forgotten. But shifting. Calming. Transforming. For the first time, Amelia realized she was no longer afraid of Lucas hurting her. She was afraid of him healing her. Because if he did, she didn't know what that would mean for her heart. The storm that night became a turning point none of them fully understood until much later, because in the days that followed, something in the atmosphere between Amelia and Lucas shifted in a subtle but undeniable way. It wasn't sudden forgiveness, and it wasn't a rekindling of what they once shared. It was quieter, slower, a hesitancy that slowly melted into a fragile comfort neither of them expected. Lucas began arriving in Snow Haven not out of desperation, but out of a genuine desire to be part of Lily's world. He made returns when Amelia needed help carrying groceries, when Lily had a doctor's appointment, when she wanted to show him a new drawing, or when she simply wanted someone to sit with her while she played in the yard. He never pushed to be invited inside, he waited for Amelia to open the door herself. She found herself doing exactly that more often than she intended. Lily became the bridge between them, pulling Lucas into late-evening dinners, small weekend outings, and quiet afternoons that should have been simple but felt layered with history and unspoken questions. Amelia was cautious, but it became harder and harder to ignore how natural Lucas was becoming in their lives. He learned exactly how to calm Lily's anxieties, how to coax laughter out of her on difficult days, and how to read her sleepy moods with startling accuracy. He carried coloring books in his car, kept emergency snacks in the glove compartment, and never once complained when Lily insisted he sit cross-legged on the floor, something that seemed completely foreign to a man who once lived his life in immaculate suits and pristine boardrooms. Amelia watched him closely, waiting for the facade to crack, for impatience to show itself, for the old version of Lucas to reappear. But day after day, he continued proving that he wasn't pretending. He wasn't doing any of this out of guilt or obligation. He was learning, growing, and choosing to show up in every small moment that mattered. She saw the change in him most clearly one late afternoon when Lily scraped her knee on the pavement. Instead of panicking or stepping back to let Amelia handle it, Lucas knelt beside their daughter, gently lifted her into his arms, and whispered soft reassurances until her sobs faded. He washed the wound with a tenderness Amelia didn't know he possessed, and she found herself blinking back tears, not from worry, but from the sight of the man he was becoming. A man she had never allowed herself to imagine was possible. Weeks stretched into months, and though Amelia tried to keep her heart guarded, her defenses wore down piece by piece. It wasn't the grand gestures that weakened her, it was the quiet moments, Lucas placing a blanket over her shoulders when she fell asleep on the couch, Lucas learning how to braid Lily's hair even though his hands shook with inexperience, Lucas waiting outside the library just in case she needed help carrying boxes of donated books. She tried to tell herself these acts meant nothing, that Lucas was simply doing what any responsible father would do. But deep down, she knew that wasn't true. Lucas wasn't simply fulfilling a role. He was letting love transform him from the inside out. One evening, as autumn settled into Snow Haven and the leaves turned shades of amber and gold, Lucas invited Amelia and Lily to the lake for a quiet picnic. He brought sandwiches and blankets, and though Amelia suspected his assistant prepared everything, she refused to mock him for it. Lily ran toward the water, insisting Lucas chase her until both were breathless with laughter. Amelia sat on the blanket watching them, a smile tugging at her lips despite every attempt to hide it. She wasn't ready to call this happiness, not yet, but it felt dangerously close. As the sun lowered behind the trees, Lily curled up between them, half asleep and clutching her rabbit toy. The sky bathed the lake in warm gold, and for several minutes, none of them spoke. It was Lucas who broke the silence, his voice quiet and unsteady, as if he had been holding back the words for weeks. "Amelia," he began, "I know I don't deserve a second chance with you. I don't expect it. I don't ask for it. But I want to be honest with you, because you deserve honesty from me now." She stiffened slightly, unsure where he was going. "I never understood what love was back then," he continued. "I didn't know how to let anyone close. I didn't know how to be vulnerable. I didn't know how to choose something real over something safe. I was afraid of intimacy, of responsibility, of becoming dependent on someone. So I pushed you away. I told myself losing you didn't matter, but the truth is, I've regretted that moment every single day since it happened." Amelia stared at the lake, afraid of looking at him, afraid of hearing the sincerity in his voice, afraid of letting the words reach the places inside her that were still healing. Lucas's voice softened. "You weren't a game. You never were. You were the first person I ever let see the real me, and I was too afraid to deal with the truth of what that meant. But I see it now. I see everything I lost. And I also see everything I want to build. With Lily. And maybe, someday, with you." Amelia's breath hitched. She wanted to stay guarded, to remind him of the pain he caused, but she couldn't deny what she had seen these past months. The sincerity in his actions. The patience. The love he gave Lily without hesitation. Slowly, she turned to face him, her voice soft but steady. "I don't know if I'm ready to forgive you," she said. "I don't know if I'll ever forget what happened. But I also can't deny what I've seen these past months. And I can't deny what Lily feels for you." He swallowed hard. "And you?" She hesitated, her eyes meeting his. "I don't know yet. But I'm willing to see where this goes. For her. And maybe for us too." A look of profound relief washed over his face, not triumphant, not expectant, but grateful in a way that made Amelia's chest ache. He didn't try to touch her, he didn't push for more. He simply nodded, accepting her words as the gift they were. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Lily stirred and reached instinctively for both of their hands. Amelia and Lucas exchanged a quiet glance, each feeling the same realization settle between them. They were no longer broken pieces scattered in different directions. They were a family, fragile and imperfect, but real. Later that evening, as they walked back toward the car, Lily held securely in Lucas's arms, Amelia looked at them and felt something shift inside her. Hope. Gentle, cautious, but alive. Lucas glanced at her over Lily's sleeping form, his eyes filled with emotions he had once been terrified to show. Amelia didn't look away. She held his gaze, letting him see what she had kept hidden for so long. Something new had begun, something built not on illusion or naive love, but on forgiveness earned, trust rebuilt, and a connection stronger for having been shattered once before. And although the future was uncertain, Amelia knew one thing with absolute clarity: this time, they would build it together.